Marcel Petiot. Marcel Petiot was born in 1897 in Auxerre, France. From the outside, his childhood looked normal, but if you asked anyone in that town, they'd tell you Marcel was different. He was violent, uncontrollable. By age 11, he had already been expelled from multiple schools. He was caught stealing, destroying property, and once he brought a loaded gun to class. His parents were exhausted, his teachers were afraid. Psychologists later described him as psychologically disturbed, maybe even a sociopath in training, but no one knew it would get this bad because Marcel was also brilliant. In 1914, the world was at war and France was bleeding, but for Marcel Petiot, the war wasn't just a battlefield, it was an opportunity. He was only 17 years old when he joined the army, a boy, barely a man. He didn't join as a fighter. No, he joined as a medical orderly. He wanted to heal, or at least that's what he said, but almost immediately something felt off. What was he really doing in the trenches? He was stationed in the trenches, knee-deep in mud, blood, and dying men. But witnesses said Marcel was different from the other medics. He was too calm when bodies exploded next to him, too eager to experiment, and always keeping syringes and medications in his own personal bag, far away from where they were meant to be. Some soldiers even whispered that Marcel was hoarding morphine. But why? Was he addicted, or was he trading lives for power? Morphine was rare, expensive, powerful. Some say he used it to dull his own twisted mind. Others say he was selling it, or worse, using it as leverage to get what he wanted from desperate soldiers. And then came the incident. In the middle of the night, there was a gunshot, not at the enemy, but inside the camp. Marcel Petiot had been shot in the foot. He claimed it was an accident, that he was wounded in action, that it was a German bullet, but there was no battle, no enemy fire, and strangely, no one else saw it happen, so the question hung in the air. Did Marcel shoot himself? What kind of man hurts himself to leave a war? Some believed he faked the injury to escape combat. Others said it was a calculated move. Get out, earn a medal, return home a hero without ever facing death. But the army didn't dig too deep. Instead, they sent him to a military hospital for recovery, and that's where things took an even stranger turn. At the hospital, doctors examined him and labeled him with 2 words: mental instability. They said he was emotionally unfit for service, that his behavior was erratic, that he showed signs of delusions, compulsions, and manipulative tendencies. But somehow, despite all of that, he was honorably discharged, and not only that, he was awarded several medals, including the Croix de Guerre for supposed acts of bravery. So let's get this straight. Shot in the foot under mysterious circumstances, diagnosed as mentally unstable, and still leaves the war a decorated hero? How? Who covered for him? And what kind of war sends a man like that home? The war created the monster, because when Marcel left the army, he didn't leave the darkness behind. He carried it with him. He had seen what death looked like up close. He touched it, he'd worked with it, and maybe, just maybe, he fell in love with it. After the war, Marcel Petiot went to medical school, finishing in record time. He opened a clinic in town. White walls, polished floors, bright smile. He was young, decorated, smart, and to the people of Villeneuve-sur-Yonne, he was more than a doctor. He was a miracle. And soon, the people came, the sick, the pregnant, addicts, the broken. He treated everyone, and sometimes he didn't even charge. He'd make house visits in the rain. He'd whisper jokes during childbirth to calm the mothers. He once helped a dying man write his final letter home. The townspeople adored him, but quietly, strange things began happening. Patients who came in healthy left feeling worse. Women who came for checkups never returned, and if you tried to ask questions, Marcel would smile and say, "She moved, family emergency, nothing to worry about." Like in the case of Louise Delaveau, a young woman named Louise Delaveau visited Marcel's clinic. She was reportedly seeking an abortion. Illegal at the time, but common under the table. She never came home. Her family searched, begged, asked questions. Marcel said she left for Paris. The case went quiet, until months later, when fishermen found a suitcase floating down the river. Inside, the decomposing body of a woman. No head, no hands, just enough left to make a guess. It could have been Louise, but without proof, there was no arrest, no trial, no justice. The file was closed, and Marcel, he kept smiling. Even with the body found, the police couldn't pin it on him. There were no witnesses, no confession, no fingerprints. And remember, this was 1920s France, small towns, little press, no forensic technology. So Marcel walked free, but it didn't stop there. He continued performing illegal abortions, prescribing dangerous drugs, and charging phantom medical bills to patients who didn't exist. Sometimes he'd fake entire surgeries. Why would a doctor create fake surgeries? It wasn't about the medicine, it was about the control, the illusion. The more people believed he was saving lives, the easier it became to get away with murder. Who would ever suspect the mayor? Yes, he was the mayor, because in 1927, Marcel ran for mayor of Villeneuve-sur-Yonne. He gave speeches, kissed babies, promised change, and again, the town loved him. He won the election. Now, he wasn't just a doctor, he controlled the clinic, the police, the city funds. That year, he fired several council members who questioned his spending and started writing himself checks from the town budget. He also stole electricity from the town hall, but even then, no one stopped him. What do you do with a man who's accused of illegal abortion, suspected of murder, falsely billing patients, embezzling town funds, and still shaking hands with people at church? Unfortunately, you look the other way. In 1931, a regional audit exposed the theft, and the local council forced him to resign, but it wasn't a scandal. It wasn't even in the papers, it was quiet, like someone trying to cover up a stain they don't want to admit exists. So Marcel packed his bags, took his wife Georgette, who stood by him through everything, and their young son, and they moved to Paris. Paris, the city of lights, lovers, and for some, escape. In 1933, Marcel Petiot walked into the city with a suitcase in one hand, a stethoscope in the other, and not a single shadow from his past behind him. Because in Paris, no one knew about the girl who vanished. No one knew about the river suitcase. No one knew he'd stolen from his town, lied to his patients, or killed with a doctor's smile. To them, he was just another educated war veteran starting over. But Marcel wasn't starting over, he was leveling up. What happens when a monster finds anonymity? He opened a medical practice in Paris, 8 de Rue Caumartin, a fashionable street surrounded by shops, schools, and people with deep pockets. His office was modern, spotless. He wore sharp suits, spoke with confidence, even offered home visits, the kind of doctor people trusted instantly. And in a city of over 2 million, who would question one more charming man with a white coat? Marcel wasn't just hiding in the crowd, he was thriving in it. Paris gave Marcel what small towns couldn't: noise, chaos, distance. You could lose yourself in Paris. You could reinvent yourself. You could even kill quietly, and no one would notice. And so Marcel became two men again. Dr. Petiot, helpful, generous, and compassionate, offering free treatment to the poor, especially during the Depression. The opportunist, writing fake prescriptions for addicts, issuing false medical certificates, charging made-up fees to patients who never existed. And for every lie, he made money. By 1941, Petiot had moved into a new house, 21 Rue Le Sueur, a 3-story townhouse in a quiet, upscale neighborhood near the Arc de Triomphe. To outsiders, it looked like success, a respectable doctor, wife, child, servants. But inside that house, he began making modifications: a new furnace, much larger than any doctor would need, soundproofed walls, a basement with thick doors, multiple locks and drains. He told neighbors he was storing medical waste. He told plumbers the pipes were experimental. He told himself, this house is for healing. By 1942, the Nazis invaded France. German soldiers now patrolled Paris streets. Phones were tapped, letters opened, Jews were disappearing, and as fear wrapped around the city like smoke, Petiot found the perfect cover for his next and darkest evolution. Because in war, when people go missing, no one questions it. And Marcel, he was about to use that fog of fear to make himself look like a hero again. But this time, he wouldn't be faking surgeries, he'd be faking escapes. People were desperate. He had just what they needed: a way out. He called it Operation Fly Tox. What is fly tox? Fly tox was the name of a popular insect poison at the time. So why would a man name his escape route after something that kills bugs? That was the first warning, but no one noticed, because when you're running for your life, you don't question the man offering you salvation, especially when he wears a doctor's coat. In a city of shadows, Marcel Petiot found the perfect mask, the perfect house, the perfect victims, and now the real operation was about to begin. How did he do it? Petiot would approach Jews, black market criminals, or resistance members with stories that he had connections with the resistance. He could smuggle them to Argentina or South America. There they'd be safe, free from Nazis, free from fear. But escape wasn't cheap. The price? 25,000 francs per person. Today, that's over $25,000 in modern US value, and people paid it, sometimes by selling everything they owned. And here's the part that'll chill you. People weren't just paying for themselves, they were paying for their children, their wives, their aging parents, entire families. Walked into his home at 21 Rue Le Sueur, believing it would be the last French address they'd ever see. They were right, just not in the way they imagined. Inside the house, Marcel greeted them with a warm smile. He showed them fake travel documents, he asked for their valuables to avoid customs inspections, and then he said, "We need to vaccinate you before you leave. Argentina has different diseases," so he injected them. The victims felt dizzy, and then they died. In most cases, the injection contained cyanide, a fast death, silent, efficient, and once they were gone, he stripped them, burned their clothes, took their gold, piled their bodies. Some were dumped in pits of quicklime, which dissolves flesh. Others were shoved into a giant custom-built furnace in his basement. And the rest were dismembered, their pieces stuffed into suitcases, trash bags, and sometimes even left behind walls. What happens when people start asking questions? Marcel was careful and very smart. He told the victims not to tell anyone they were escaping. That way, when they went missing, no one reported them. But not everyone stayed quiet. One man, Yvon Dreyfus, a former spy, told a friend he was leaving through a secret route. He never came back. The friend reported it to the police, and now the resistance and the Nazis were both interested in Dr. Marcel Petiot. The cover-up gets complicated to deflect suspicion. Marcel created fake enemies. He spread rumors that he was being hunted by the Gestapo. He even told police that the people who vanished through his house were enemies of France, traitors, or Nazi collaborators. Incredibly, the French police believed him. They even protected him for a time. By March of 1944, the house at 21 Rue Le Sueur, the very place where Marcel Petiot promised salvation, began to betray him. The neighbors didn't hear screaming, they didn't see blood, but they smelled something foul, something human, a thick, sour stench drifting through the upscale neighborhood of Rue Le Sueur. At first, neighbors assumed it was garbage, rotting food, a dead animal maybe, but the odor didn't fade. It got stronger, richer, more unnatural. Then came the smoke, billowing from the chimney at number 21, thick, black, oily, not like wood, not like coal. Something else was burning, something wetter, meatier. One woman who lived in the building next door said she started waking up at night with her throat burning. She thought it was just the cold until her curtains began to stink, like boiled fat mixed with acid, she said. Another neighbor sent his children to live with relatives after they started having nightmares, just from the smell coming through the walls. What do you do when the smoke smells like people? One neighbor knocked on the door, no answer. Another noticed the windows were shut tight, sealed, no sound, no movement, no lights, just the chimney still coughing out that awful smoke. Finally, someone called the police. The horror house is locked. When the officers arrived, they expected a fire hazard, maybe a gas leak. They knocked, no one came, so they forced entry. And what they found inside? The basement. Down in the basement, the air was choking. A large furnace roared in the corner, its metal glowing red, like something out of a medieval torture chamber. Nearby were suitcases, dozens of them stacked neatly. The police found a woman's engagement ring, a child's sandal, stacks of dentures and gold teeth, photographs partially burned. These weren't enemies, they weren't traitors, they were desperate people who trusted the wrong man. Some victims weren't even fully dead when they were burned. There were scratch marks on the inside of the furnace door. Let that sit for a moment. As the investigators explored the home, they found something odd. Journals, notes, maps, fake travel documents, but also weapons, medical instruments, Nazi uniforms, resistance symbols, and a list titled Fly Talks Departed, with over 60 names. Was this man a killer, a spy, a freedom fighter? Even the officers couldn't figure it out. There was just one problem. Where was the butcher? The house was full of evidence, but Marcel Petiot was gone, vanished. They found 68 suitcases and over 100 names listed in his house ledgers. So the question that screamed louder than the chimney smoke was, how many did he really kill? Paris was boiling with fear. March 1944, war everywhere, and now, a new kind of terror. A man with a white coat and a warm smile had turned his home into a graveyard. The police called him a madman. The press named him the Butcher of Paris. France launched one of the largest manhunts in its wartime history. His photo was everywhere, on lampposts, in newspapers, on cafe walls, whispered about in underground trains, but still, no one could find him. You'd think the story ends when the bodies are found, but for Marcel Petiot, the game was just beginning, because what he did next made the entire country question who they could trust. While investigators were combing the country, Marcel was still in Paris, living among the very people hunting him, maybe even walking past the police every day, smiling. He grew a beard, wore glasses, changed his name to Henri Valery, and under this new identity he joined the French resistance. Petiot convinced resistance leaders that he was an expert in sabotage, trained in secret missions, willing to kill Nazis, and he did. Not innocent civilians this time, but actual German soldiers and collaborators. He ran messages, planted explosives, even helped resistance members disappear, just like he'd done before, only now they thought he was a hero. By day, Henri Valery was organizing anti-Nazi raids. By night, he was reading headlines about his own crimes, as if he were a stranger. The police were hunting Petiot, but he wasn't Petiot anymore, not to them. To them, he was Comrade Valery, loyal, brave, valuable, and the longer he stayed hidden, the closer he got to being trusted with more power. During this time, the police made several arrests. They caught people connected to him, his wife and child. Georgette and Gérard lived quietly, away from Paris for much of the war, but when the crimes were uncovered, when the news broke about the furnace, the bones, the suitcases, they didn't speak. Not to the press, not to police, not to the families of the victims. They disappeared from public view. Investigators interrogated Georgette multiple times. She insisted she knew nothing. She thought her husband was helping Jews escape. She said he often worked late and she didn't ask questions. But could she really have missed it? The stench of burnt flesh, the dozens of passports, the bloodstains in his clothes. The court found no solid evidence to charge her, but many believe she knew more than she admitted. They also caught his brother, a few former accomplices, even someone who helped with the furnace. But none of them gave him up. Why? Because Petiot had carefully manipulated each one. He told some he was killing Nazis. He told others he was working for the government. He told a few nothing at all. Every version of him was different, tailored. He was like fog, always shifting, never held. So what finally brought him down? Not justice, not detectives, not soldiers. It was his own ego. In late 1944, as France was being liberated and the Nazi pushed back, Petiot let his guard down. He visited a public metro station where his new beard and glasses didn't fool everyone. A former police informant recognized him. He alerted the authorities, and this time they moved fast. In his bag, they found a pistol, 31,000 francs, 50 sets of fake ID papers, and a list of new escape routes he was planning to use. He was smiling. Why was he smiling? Because Petiot still believed he could talk his way out of it. March 1946, Dr. Marcel Petiot, charged with 27 murders, suspected of more than 60, and seated in the courtroom like a guest of honor, not a man surrounded by death. But the real twist, he wasn't just a defendant, he was his own lawyer. What happens when a killer controls his own trial? Petiot refused to let anyone speak for him. He addressed the court directly with charm, wit, and disturbing confidence. He smiled at the jury. He joked with the judge. He called himself a true patriot and France's protector. And the courtroom, they didn't know whether to be impressed or sickened. From the very first day, Petiot tried to rewrite the story. He admitted to killing, yes, but not the victims the court named. I killed enemies of France, spies, Nazis, traitors. He claimed the people he disposed were Gestapo agents, collaborators, or criminals. He said his escape network was real, and the people who died, they were executed in the name of justice. He even insisted he worked with the resistance. But where were the witnesses? None. Why? Because they were all conveniently underground or dead. Prosecution showed pictures of bones, teeth, skulls. He deflected. He said the police planted them. He said they weren't real. He even claimed that some victims might have killed themselves. In one moment of unbelievable arrogance, he said, "Show me the bodies. Where is the proof they didn't die in war?" Imagine that. A man caught with a furnace full of human remains, demanding evidence. The prosecution brought it all. Suitcases with names scratched into the lining, wedding rings from entire families, dentures, hair, ID cards, passports, testimony from neighbors about the smoke, the screams, the smell, but Petiot unshaken. Some experts suggested Petiot wasn't just manipulative, he was delusional. He saw himself as a dark savior, a one-man justice system. To him, murder wasn't evil, it was cleansing. There were whispers in Paris that maybe Petiot was telling the truth, maybe some of his victims were traitors, maybe this was just war justice, misunderstood. But then the jury saw one name, a child 6 years old missing, last seen with Petiot, her ID card found in his wall, and that's when it became clear this wasn't justice, this was evil. After a month-long trial, the jury found Marcel Petiot guilty of 26 out of 27 murders. The court ordered death by guillotine. On May 25th, 1946, Marcel stood calmly beside the guillotine. He smiled at the priest and said, "Gentlemen, I am a traveler about to board the ship of life." And then silence. Marcel Petiot's body was buried in an unmarked grave. No monument, no legacy, just a name scratched off history's page. You might think the story ends here. The crazy thing is that during the investigation, police found strange files in Petiot's home. Notes written in code, lists of names with symbols next to them, photos with eyes scratched out, maps marked with red pins. Some of those files were turned over to military intelligence, and then they disappeared. Were they evidence or secrets? Was Petiot really working with resistance fighters, or was that just another mask? But one thing is certain, the house on Rue Le Sueur was demolished, but for years, locals claimed to smell smoke near the rubble. Some said they saw figures at night, lights flickering where there should be none, and every once in a while someone new stumbles on a suitcase in an attic or a name scratched in the back of a photo, and the past comes knocking again.